but a good group of friends is the best lottery anybody could win. That's just an awesome statement. Tonight on In the Woodyard, it's a fireside chat. People have questions, I got answers. Here we go. So I've done a couple of these chats. I actually recorded one about a week ago and I accidentally recorded over the top of it. So I'm going to record some more stuff here for you guys. What I did is I went and I saved some of the comments that people have asked me that are good questions or comments, and they deserve some response, but it's not something that I would normally cover on an everyday video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you guys some of these questions and then answer some of them and kind of do a little chat here. So here's the first one. First thing I want to talk about is wood that people get for smoking. Now there's a huge debate amongst firewood people and a huge debate amongst people that smoke meat with wood in smokers. And I have 5, 6, maybe 7, yeah, somewhere in that range of people that I sell to that smoke meat. Some of them do it professionally, where they're actual chain restaurants. Some of them do them professionally where it's independent and they do events and they do catering. And there's some of them that do it, I wouldn't say professionally, but they make some side money with it. And what they do is they make some side money, so it's not professionally, but yet they do a really good job. Now, there's other ones that just do it for themselves that I sell to, so I'm going to kind of cover some of the things. Now, in the comments, I had a video, this was probably a month ago, and there was a bunch of comments about what kind of wood is best for smoking with, and I can tell you this, there's no agreement. I have a customer that comes all the way from the UP, and he wants hickory. He used to drive all the way down to like Georgia or Alabama to get his hickory because he couldn't find it anywhere up in the UP, which is the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, for those of you that are not familiar. So if you're a Youper, you know what that means. A Youper is someone that lives up in the UP. So he drove down to get hickory because he used to make a big long road trip and buy wood. And he found out that I had it and he was like, awesome. So he's come a couple times now and bought some hickory because he thinks it's the best. Now, when he got there, he had to smell it. He wanted me to split a piece open because he didn't want it totally dry, so he wanted to check it out and he thought it was just excellent. So he got a full cord last time he was here. And then I got another guy that I sell to that's not far from here, and all he wants is white oak. Actually, I have two customers. They will only buy white oak because they think that's the best. Now, I've got another customer, he buys white oak and cherry because he likes to mix the two. Then I have another customer that buys only cherry. Now, obviously there's going to be a debate, no different than what's the best pickup truck. You know, is it Ford, Chevy, Dodge, Toyota, Nissan? Who knows? Whatever you have, if you're happy, good for you. That's my attitude on it. Doesn't matter to me. But if my customers want a certain kind of wood, that's what I'm going to get them. I've got another customer that I sell to that's a chain restaurant, and he's been a professional chef, he said, for 35 years now. He said he's smoked meat at every restaurant he's ever worked at. He said he's worked at like a half a dozen. And the one he's at now, he's been there 10 years. And when I deliver wood, only thing he says is, I don't want any pine. He says, I don't care what kind it is as long as it's hardwood. That's the main thing. He says, I like maple, I like ash, I like oak, I like cherry. Just bring me that kind of wood. So that's what I do. And he's totally fine with it. So, and he said he doesn't think there's any different. Now, there's a guy in the comments here that's a supposed expert, and he said cherry and most fruit woods are what works best for pork. And he said oak and hickory are best for beef. And he said, but there are no rules, only guidelines. So there you go. You never know. There's going to be people that think that, you know, their particular kind of wood is the best because it's what they use. And I think a lot of it goes down to no different than when it comes down to trucks. I think whatever guys get used to, or what their dad had or grandpa had or their neighbor or best friend, and they have had good experiences with a certain brand, so that's what they stick with, and that's great and that's fine. I, like my good friend, ex-friend I should say, Tony, we are non-denominational when it comes to pretty much anything. We don't care truck-wise, chainsaw-wise, equipment, as long as it does the job. There are certain things I like more because of personal experience, I can tell you that. My dump trailer, for instance, it's galvanized. I absolutely love it. I think it's fantastic. It's an N&N trailer. I know there's a lot of other brands out there, but there's not many galvanized ones, and the galvanized ones don't rust. And here in the Rust Belt in Wisconsin, that's a good thing. So here's another guy made a comment here. He says, Chris, you're so right. I can't stand the bickering about whose is the best. whether it's firewood or different kinds of chainsaws or trucks. He said, I've had things I've liked and disliked. He said, when I find something I don't like, if something I have ends up being a lemon, I get rid of it. I don't go back. So personal experience. And I think a lot of you come to channels like this and other channels and they want to know what our experiences are because you want information more than anything. And that's what I try to do in the reviews when we talk about equipment in general. I try to make sure that nothing is being focused on so much that that's the only thing I'll talk about. When it comes to chainsaws, I have run many different brands and I like them all. They all are a little bit different. And if you have a brand you like, I'm happy for you. If the other guy has a totally different brand, I'm happy for him. And if he likes what he's got. There are certain brands, I think, that have better models in them. They have products that are really good and there's products they have that aren't so good. When it comes to professional chainsaws, I think they're way better than any homeowner saw. I don't think there should even be homeowner saws. I think there should be all pro saws. They should just make them right. But then there's that price point they go after. And I know they make a lot of money on their homeowner saws, but they're disposable items in reality. But as a person that's had some experience, buy the professional stuff, whatever brand it is. It's going to last longer. It's going to perform better. It's going to have higher resale. That's pretty much all I got to say to that. Get the good stuff. Next question that came up in the comments. We're going to go to a new section here. This one is a good one. This came from Crazy Man. He comments all the time in the comments. Really a good guy. Really knowledgeable and really smart when it comes to looking at things. He's not a guy that's like, he thinks he's right all the time, but he has really good insight. And we're talking about how much your truck has earned. And my truck has made me hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've had it 10 years now, and I've delivered literally hundreds of thousands of dollars of wood with it, which not many guys can say. It's not a show pony, it is a workhorse. So he made a comment. He says, birds of the same feather flock together. And he said he remembers his grandparents telling him that. And he said he's seen a few bad feathers that left his flock and a few that have gained more good feathers. And he's commenting about my group of friends and my family. And he had some really, really cool things to say. He says, great group of friends you have there, Chris, with Bert, Adam, Gavin, and Keith. All great friends to have, good workers, and they help you out fantastically. He says, Tony is a good friend as well, even if he's an ex-best friend. He isn't. We just joke about it. Your brothers, Kenny and Eric, are good brothers to have as well. And this is the comment that he made at the end that to me was the best. Life is not about money. Yes, you need money to buy things and pay bills, but a good group of friends is the best lottery that anyone could ever win. That's a good statement. Because having money doesn't mean you're going to have friends. When you need help, yeah, you can buy friends, but they're not really friends. But the true friends will be there when you need them. And I always say the best time to help someone is when they need help, not when it's convenient for you. And these guys all help me when I need help. So they're all awesome. So that was a good one. I like that. I'm going to say it one more time. Life is not about money. Yes, you need it to buy things and pay bills. But a good group of friends is the best lottery anybody could win. That's just an awesome statement. Next one. The next statement is about pine. Because I always say pine is fine. And this is a guy who's 78 years old. He lives in Arizona. His name is Don. And he says the only species of wood that they have is ponderosa pine. That's the only thing they have. And he's heated wood for 40 years. And he's been cutting about 6 to 8 cords. But his body's been protesting, he said. But then the price of propane went up, so he went back to cutting. And he found an arborist that's willing to bring him wood so that he doesn't have to go out and find it. And so that's a really good deal. But he did a few bits of research, he said, and he found that 10 pounds of ponderosa pine puts out the same BTUs as a gallon of propane. So he figured out his cost savings, and he's cutting his cost in half to heat his place. So that's a cool thing. So he said he can cut split wood at his leisure as long as he can run a brush down the chimney. And his last sentence is, in all caps, pine is fine. Yes, it is. Pine is fine. It's great in the campfire. I love it. It snaps, it crackles, it pops. I don't have any here. This pile right behind me here is all maple. It's all soft maple that I brought home. There's some ash in there too. And that's what I've been burning lately. I just burn all the chunks as I sort them out from piles that we have. If we get wood that someone else has cut, like a lot of times we'll pick up stuff and it'll be cut down to rounds already, and a lot of stuff we get is 12, 13 inches. And I can't really sell that because it doesn't mount in a lot of people's racks that they put it in. It's got to be at least 15, 16 or 17 is fine. The 2-inch variance is fine. One either way of 16, I like that. And that was just fine. I've never had anybody complain that the wood is too short. What they do complain about, however, when I deliver wood, is if I have a long one in there. Because a lot of people I deliver to will stack their wood up in the side of their garage or in the front of their garage, and they want it to be fairly even, and they don't want it sticking out, so when they open their car door, they're banging into it along the side of their garage, or when they walk past it, it's catching their leg. They want it to be even or slightly short. I've never had anybody say, oh, you're cutting these pieces short, I'm losing wood, I'm losing volume here. No one's ever said that to me in years and years of selling wood. But they do say, oh, this one's like 19 or 20 inches. And they pull it out and they put it up on top. I said, well, I can get rid of it if you want, because I always take extra wood. He says, no, I'll figure out a way. I just don't want it sticking out in my rack. So too long generally is the thing that they comment on. The other thing they comment on a lot of times is too big of pieces. And this happened when I first started selling wood. People were asking me, because I would deliver boiler wood, basically, heating wood, because that's what I grew up doing, so that's what I delivered. I just thought that was the thing. But I didn't realize most of the people that I sell to are burning in one of these or a fireplace. 90% of the people do not want heating wood. They want this kind of wood. They want drinking wood. That's what they're after. Whiskey sour, by the way. Not a beer drinker so much. And I have one, but that's about it. But I do like my whiskey. So there. The wood size matters to my customers. Smaller stuff generally is what they want. If anybody can pick it up with one hand, like this is a short one obviously, but if you can pick it up with one hand, this is what they want for my customers. This is how I fill my stove when I'm out here. I just kind of reach back and chuck a few pieces in, so it's pretty efficient. Because I don't like to get up, it burns extra energy, and I can have that energy used for cutting wood. Next question. So the next question comes up about a video I did about sharpening a chain. And I use a Dremel, as a lot of you know, and I use the 7/32 stone bits. They're Oregon stone bits for sharpening. I don't use a file very often. When I do, it's generally because I'm in the woods, or I just need to touch up a couple teeth because I hit a rock or something like that. And I might not want to go get my Dremel, or I might not have my battery pack for sharpening it for electricity. But this guy wanted to know, how many times can you sharpen a chain with a stone bit and a Dremel? Same as a file. When you get it sharp, it's sharp. So that could be anywhere. If you don't hit anything, like say the ground, you don't hit a rock, you don't hit the sand, you don't hit a nail or a spike or a screw or a piece of fence, those kind of things can really mess up teeth. So that'll take a lot longer to sharpen. It'll take more tooth down because you got more tooth that's damaged that you need to fix. But if you're cutting clean wood, especially like in the winter time, if you're cutting on snow, you're not hitting the ground. Your wood is clean and fresh, then you're probably not going to have to sharpen as much. Generally about 2 tanks is as much as I will ever go without sharpening, because on that second tank, when you get about halfway through that second tank, I am usually thinking I need to sharpen, but I usually power through and just finish it up. And if you got a bigger saw like I have, the 90 or 70 cc saws, you can power through some stuff. So it works pretty good. But in general, when it comes to sharpening the chains, if you're not hitting stuff and damaging the teeth, with a Dremel or a file, I can usually get 6 at least, 7, 8 sharpenings, depending on how much you have to touch it up. But I generally will only let a chain go down to about 1/3 of its original length, and then I'll get rid of it. Because shorter teeth don't cut as well. And if you don't think so, I've got a video I did showing you what the difference was between a new chain and a little stubby chain. And the stubby chain took twice as long to cut. And it was sharp, but they were little bitty teeth. And that was with taking the rakers down too. So there's a lot of debate about this, but generally most loggers will tell you, most professionals, people that do this for a living, you're losing money if you're using a chain that is short in the tooth. You want longer teeth. A fresh chain always works great. Now, there was a guy that made a comment about a fresh chain and sex. Yes, this was his comment. He asked a friend of his, what's a better feeling? Putting a new chain on and cutting wood, or sex? And he said, we're both older guys, and we thought, definitely the chain. I thought that was funny. I'm not sure about that. I'm kind of on the fence there. Next question. This came from Ray. Very short statement, but we were talking about chainsaws and big ones. Because I have two 3120s, that's 120cc saws, and I have 592, and that's a 93cc saw. And then I have a couple of 70cc saws along with, those are Husqvarna's, and I also have an Echo 73cc saw. I love more power. Whenever I use a small saw, I'm pushing on it, I'm wishing it would cut faster. So Ray's comment was perfect. I never met a CC I did not like. Never a better statement than that. The only bad thing about the big saws, they tend to tire you out faster. But on the other hand, they cut faster. So there's that. So I like a big saw. I like to cut fast. And once I get hot and sweaty and dirty, I don't care. I just keep going. I like to cut at least 3-4 tanks when I cut. That seems to be a good number. And then you can work on the wood from there. The most, and this is another question that came up that it's not on here, but it deserves answering. The most tanks I cut in one day was 12, and it about killed me, and that was years ago, probably 10 years ago. I cut 12 tanks. I cut almost a complete semi-load in one day. The only reason I quit cutting is I ran out of daylight. But that was a long day. The next day I was very tired. That night I was very tired. But 9 is a lot. I've done 9 a few times. 6 is a really good number as far as how many tanks I can cut and feel good about myself the next day, because I am not a spring chick anymore. I'm almost 100, and I tire out faster now. So 6 tanks is a good day's work for anybody. And when I cut, generally I'm cutting in a log pile, so I'm also throwing all those rounds, which is the hard part of the work. So that's a good number. Next question. So this came from Evan, and he said, I was talking about saws and what saw is the best saw, because I think they're all good. Some are just a little better than others. They just have different features. I like them all. I like the variety. And I made the comment that if the saws weren't any good that manufacturers are making, people wouldn't buy them. So you got 3 major brands. I know there's other ones, but the 3 major brands are your Steel, Husqvarna, and Echo. And if they didn't make good saws, they'd be out of business. It's that simple. Well, I shouldn't say that. They wouldn't be out of business. They'd be out of the saw business, because they have lots of other tools they make too. So all 3 of them make really good stuff. So this Evan, he made a comment. He says, I can't stand the bickering about who's the best. I've owned all different vehicles, all different saws that you've mentioned. They've all had likes and dislikes. I am due for a new saw. I'm not sure which brand I'm going to pick, and I like that. So my opinion when it comes to saws, same as wood, same as money. More is the right number. Next question. The next question is about drying firewood, and I get this all the time on my channel because I have the bins where I just throw the wood in loose. And I had a guy made a comment. He said he just couldn't believe that was going to dry wood better, so he did an experiment where he stacked his wood in a full cord, and then he had another full cord he threw in a bin, and they did a moisture test. And he said after 3 months, the wood in the bin was dry. The wood in the stacked full cord rectangle, 4 feet by 4 feet by 8 feet, he said he pulled it apart, he did a moisture test in the middle. He said the wood in the bin was 5% drier. He said it was a difference of 24% in the stacked, 19% in the bin. So, one of the things a lot of people don't realize is in my bins, I have no shade, and there's wind out there all the time, so it's constantly drying. And a question also came up, do I cover the bins? Only in the winter time would I cover them, and last year we had almost no snow, so I never covered them. But this fall I will be covering them late in the fall. I'm going to cover probably at least 50% of the bins that I have with big tarps to keep the snow off, because what I found happens is your snow, when it's on the piles, as the sun hits it, over time that snow will melt off, water will run down, and then it'll freeze on the inside, and then you get a giant wood sickle. So I don't want that. But I found that the easiest way to do it is to have my tarps be in sections so that I can pull a section away, get at that wood, pull a section away, get at that wood. So it's not just one giant tarp, because My brother Ken has found this out too. If you have a giant tarp, all that snow is on that tarp. So you have to either shovel it off or dig it out, and it's really hard to get that whole tarp off. Now you only cover the tops, obviously, because if you got to leave your sides open so it can breathe, because if you cover the whole thing, you're going to lock moisture in, and the moisture from the ground is going to wick up and get into the wood. So that's an important thing. So this guy here, I didn't have his name in here. He says one of his friends stacked red oak on a pallet with just the top covered. It sat in the shade for 2 years. After 2 years, the wood still sizzled. He didn't do a moisture test, but it still sizzled when he tried to burn it. And then he had another neighbor that had an IBC totes, which is loose, and he said that wood did not sizzle, it was fine, same amount of time. Loose stacking is better. I shouldn't say loose stacking, loose piling, that's the right phrase to say. Because I thought of this analogy. If you took a 1 cup size tin, 1 cup, filled it with rice that was ready to eat, not dry rice, ready to eat, packed it in there tight, turned it upside down, tight, so it's like a little sandcastle of rice. And then if you took rice and dumped it out but sprinkled it out on a plate so that it's loose, which one of those do you think would dry off faster? Which one would cool off faster of cooked rice? The spread out one, because it can breathe. Air's getting to it. It's spread out. When you want to cool off your food, you spread it out, you stir it up. You don't just let it sit contained, tight, and packed. Some people have a hard time with that concept, but the fact is, loose dries better. Air can flow through all those cracks. When you stack it, pack it tight, it's not going to breathe as well. The next one came from somewhere in Europe. He didn't say what country. I'm guessing it's Finland, possibly. Sweden, maybe. They go by the cubic meter. So he was telling me about birch, which is what they have. Their prices are $200 a cubic meter. Now a cubic meter, for those of you that don't know, if you were to take 1/3 of a cord, or a face cord, or a ricka-rinka roll, that's a pile of wood, stack of wood, 4 feet high, 16-inch pieces, 8 feet long. Everybody should know what that is now that I explained it, hopefully. If you take 80%, actually it's 0.82% of that pile, it's a cubic meter. So it's less than 1/3 of a cord, less than a face cord. And they get $200 for it. That's the going rate. So if you were to compare that to our prices, I charge $120 for a face cord, which means he's getting in a full cord, if you were to do it this way, there'd be 3 face cords in a full cord, or 3/3. I get $120 for each one, so it'd be $360 for that full cord. Going by the cubic meters, you would get 3 3/4 cubic meters. So that means for what we would call a full cord, he's got 1 1/3, not quite 1 1/3, a little less than 1 1/3 full cords, and he's getting $200 for each cubic meter. So that means if you were to figure it out mathematically, he's getting almost $800 for a full cord. I don't know of too many people that get that, and I know Chicago gets close to that. I think out in DC they get close to that. Some of the bigger cities will get that, because I've always said this, and for those of you that have been around a while, you know this. If you've got lots of people, a little bit of wood, the prices are going to be high. If you've got lots of wood and very few people, prices are going to be low. Supply and demand. It's something a lot of people don't think about. So whatever area you're in, the market will dictate the price, unless you take it to a market where there's a lot of people. So you got to think about that. So another question that comes up all the time, the firewood processor, the Easton made 22NB that we have. People want to know, how often do I sharpen the chain? Does it get dull easy? How long does it last? Good questions. Now, we just recently were cutting some big red oak where the saw barely could reach across. So they were 22, 23 inches, and the bark barely reaches across. And we noticed it was chattering, which means we had to back off the pressure or the speed of the bar coming down so it could cut slower, because if we had it fast going through that big stuff, the saw would kind of bounce and sometimes it would stop. It would get bound in there. So we found that we had to back off the speed, and we found out on some of that big stuff, it was just barely getting through. It was still chattering. And I thought the chain was sharp, so I went and looked, and it looked sharp to me, but then I felt it and I could tell it was not sharp. I ran my hand across it, it wouldn't even come close to cutting me. So I sharpened it up, world of difference. So to answer the question, how often do we sharpen the chain? When it needs to be sharpened, which I would have to say, when I'm cutting with the processor, I can probably cut half a semi-load, so that would be at least 5 or 6 full cords, which is a lot of wood, before I notice it needs some help, and I'll touch it up. And I don't take the chain off. We do have spare chains, but I just get my Dremel with the 7/32 bit and my power pack. I climb up there and I sharpen the whole chain. Leave it right on. It takes so much extra time to change the chain. And all the guys that run processors in the woods, when they're cutting down trees, they sharpen on the bar. They climb out of their unit, they climb down by it, they bring the bar down and they sharpen it up while it's still on, because it's just a pain changing it out. It takes way longer to change it out, which could be done. But I sharpen it up, and it's amazing how, once I get it sharp, how much better it cuts. Now, one thing you got to remember, it's a little different than a chainsaw in that, number one, it's a 404 chain, which there's not many chainsaws that run 404. My big 3120 has a 404 chain because we run a 5-foot bar on that one. So it's got a 404 chain, and for those of you that don't know, the 404 chain is much harder steel. It takes longer and it's harder to sharpen by far. You can tell right away. If you sharpen a lot of chains, that 404 chain is sharper. And then there's bigger chain than that too that you can get that's probably even harder. Now, when I sharpen it, I notice right away that it cuts better. And when I am sharpening it, it does take a little longer. You got to put a little more effort into it. And you got to grind the tooth a little bit more with that bit. You got to go up and down and make sure you kind of get it all nice and even, because it's harder to get an edge on it. It's harder to get that tip to be sharp. It's harder to get the gullet where you got a good curve to it. And if there's any damage in it, if you hit anything, it takes even longer to get out. So that's something you got to think about. Another thing about that 404 chain is you got to realize that unit, the Easton made 22 MB, that bar, I can adjust the speed on it real easily, but it's got the same pressure regardless of the speed. So if you've got 115 horsepower Kubota engine running it, which is what it is, there is also 60 tons of pressure, hydraulic pressure, running that bar and chain. So if I was to crank it up, it literally would be a tomahawk chop. It would be a, but you don't want that. You want it to come through just so it cuts nicely, as fast as possible, so that the bar gets through the material and you're cut, and then you can do the split. You don't want it to go super slow, but you want it to be fairly fast. So it's a lot of playing around, but to answer the question is, maybe every 5 or 6 full cords. If you got really good clean wood, and it's a softer wood, maybe a little longer. If you were cutting something like cherry or birch, or say aspen, or something like soft maple, those all would cut a lot easier. But if you're cutting hickory, or oak, or locust, you got to slow the bar down so it doesn't feed so fast that you can't get through the material. So that's the answer to the question. It depends, same as a chainsaw. But a chainsaw, generally, I'm on a faster sharpening routine than on the processor. The processor can go a little longer because you've got so much power and so much speed with that chain that it'll get through most anything. That's all I got for tonight, folks. I'm going to drink the rest of my whiskey. You're going to go watch some more videos because there's 1,500 waiting. But I'll be back here tomorrow morning at 5:30 a.m. so you can watch some more. Good night, Irene.